Well, we have come to the point in our class where we've pretty well looked at the roles of a parish nurse and what a parish nurse is. Today we're going to finish up with those things that make putting it all into practice work. So we're going to start with setting up your office and documentation. Initially, before you set up your office, there needs to be a clear understanding of the position. That may seem real simple, but most churches have their space utilized by more people than what they have space. And so most of the people who serve within the church may or may not have an office. So the question becomes, why do you need one? And what is your office going to look like? You're also looking at the understanding of the relationship you have with the ministry team. This will be different in each congregation. If you are a small church with a pastor but nobody else, the ministry team will be you and the pastor. A church that also has a DCE, a school, music ministry, you may actually be in a team ministry with everybody. And you need to fit into the organizational structure. Just as our national church body has organizational structure, so does each congregation. So where does the parish nurse fit? I can't tell you. I can tell you where it might fit. You're going to have to find that out for yourself in the constitution of your congregation. What we do know is it will fit under some board someplace. In some congregations, it will fit under elders because you are providing some spiritual care. In some congregations, it will fit under the Board for Human Care or whatever similar title you have because you're providing acts of mercy. In some congregations, it might fit under stewardship because it's a stewardship of your time and your talents. And you're also utilizing other volunteers. Some congregations, it actually fits under evangelism because we welcome people from the community, whether they're churched or not, and the word I used before, side door evangelism. It could fit any place. So what you need to know is where does it fit in your church? Because you're not wanting to reinvent something that already exists. You're not wanting to take somebody else's territory away from them. You're just trying to offer something new. So look at your congregation, look at the constitution of your congregation, and see where that may be. You may all be too early in the game, but if you just do where do you think it might be? If you look at the setup of your church, where do you think you might fit?
Human care.
Human care.
Maybe missions.
Okay, missions.
Because it's a mission.
Yeah, if you have a mission board, that certainly would fit there.
Or elders.
Mm-hmm. Or care ministry.
Yeah, so similar but different. The parish nurse office. When you're setting up the office, we're looking for location. Where is it going to be? You want it to have some place that's accessible and visible. If people have to search all over to find you, they're probably not going to come. You're also going to want your office that is accessible by those who have limited mobility. Because since you are the nurse's office, you probably have people with limited mobility that are going to be looking for you. So to have you on the third floor with no elevator is probably not a good plan. Where might you be? My particular office is kind of the junction point between our sanctuary and our school, so I have easy access from both directions. But the story of my office, which I'll share in a few moments, in one way is a nightmare, but it also maybe provides some challenges and opportunities for you. So I will share my nightmare and my dream. In some places, the parish nurse office will be private because you have enough space. And sometimes you have to share it with somebody. If your office is shared, that becomes a problem because confidentiality. So if you're sharing an office, are you both in the office at the same time? Or is the other person usually here on Mondays and you're usually here on Tuesdays? It's probably not an issue. So looking, if I'm sharing an office, how am I also safeguarding confidentiality. And what might I want in my office? In your curriculum that those of you taking the course actually have, there's a listing of things that you probably would want for a startup kit. Some districts have gotten grants to help you with some of that. In most cases, that's probably not true, but most of the startup things are relatively inexpensive. A blood pressure cuff, a locked file cabinet, a telephone, access to a copy machine, a desk, certain things, and then you will grow. Now let me tell you about the evolution of my office. When I first started doing parish nursing, we did not have an extra place to put me, because we were in a building program then to expand our school, and every little nook and cranny had an extra classroom in it because the school had run out of space. So my office was a corner of the overflow room where we served the Sunday morning coffee hour. It had a desk, but the desk was an old teacher's desk, and it had a small, very small file cabinet and a very small bookshelf. And I was in the corner. The interesting thing is, though, at the same time that I was beginning parish nursing in my congregation, I had a full-time teaching job at the college. So my office hours were in the afternoon. I came on Monday afternoons, and 9 times out of 10, my desk was gone. So I would come to my office hours, and my desk was not there anymore, because the school had had a basketball game or a volleyball game, and they moved my desk down to their gym to make it a ticket booth. So I would have to drag my desk back to the corner. By the time I got my office put back to shape, my office hours were pretty much over. So I had a desk that was movable and an office that disappeared on real regular occasions. At the end of the first year, when I asked for the annual review of the program, the congregational chairperson said, "What is the one thing that would make you happiest?" And I said, "The one thing that would make me happiest is that my office didn't keep disappearing. I would like a place that continued to be there and a desk that nobody could move." Well, we still didn't have any extra space, but I got a big desk, an office desk, that was in the corner, and they put little cubicle things around it. Well, that wasn't ideal, but at least it had the appearance of private. It was my own space, and it was a desk nobody could move. And I got the promise that when the new edition of the school was finished, I got the room next door, and it was going to end up being, actually, I have the best office in the whole place now, because it's a room that once was a nursery classroom, then it was a 5th grade classroom, and now it is my office. So I have a little seating area, I have my own bathroom, I have a private conference area, but all of this began with the office that kept disappearing. So I share that so that when you're starting, if you're having a hard time finding the right place, go for what you can find and work towards making things better. Don't hold out for the best, because it may take a while. I know of some parish nurses who actually had their office in what previously had served as a closet, because it was a room at least. And so they'd move the things out of the closet, and they'd be in the closet. It was big enough for a little desk and 2 chairs. You probably want to keep the door open, because it was very confidential and claustrophobic at the same time. Documentation is part of what you need to do in the office. We know as nurses, wherever we work, there's some sort of documentation. It's part of the scope and standards of practice for nursing in general. It's also part of the scope and standards for the nurse who works in the church, parish nursing. So it is a professional responsibility, but the way you do it is going to vary. There are formats that people have developed that are just checklists. There are formats that companies have developed that are computer programs. Many parish nurses do anecdotal charting, which is just paper in a file folder stuck in a locked file box. So whatever system works best for you, but the important thing is that you're doing it. And you're doing it for probably three main reasons. One is because you're going to be having continuity of care, the simple thing of blood pressures. And we'll start there because that's usually the first step the nurse does. Unless your memory is really, really good, if you're taking somebody's blood pressure and you're doing it every month and trying to follow a pattern, you probably aren't going to remember what everybody's blood pressure was last month. You might remember the unusual one, but you're probably not going to remember all of them. You'll remember whether it was normal or not, but you may not remember exactly that it was 120 over 80, or was it 130? I don't remember. It was something like that, you know. And so we don't want to guess. So documentation refreshes your memory. Another thing about documentation is if it was abnormal, we of course are not treating or diagnosing, but we need to let people know what that means. And so if the number exceeds the boundary lines that American Heart Association has put up, we need to inform the person that they need to come back and get it rechecked. They need to go to their doctor's office and get it rechecked, whatever the parameters are, or they need to go to the emergency room immediately and have something done. We need to document that we told them that. Because if something happens and they did not do that, I need to be able to prove that I told you to do that. Okay, I can't make you go, but I do have a responsibility to tell you that that was important and you should go. So documenting it, if there is any possibility of a liability, or forget the liability, there's just a possibility of a complaint and you're going to have a disgruntled customer, if you will. The fact that you documented that you told them puts the responsibility, you know, on them. And so that becomes really important. Another reason for documentation is even though we're not sharing names, we're going to need to give monthly or annual or both reports to whatever your governing board is in your congregation. And if you're an institutional model, you're going to need to give that to the institution. Documenting how many people I saw and for what purposes, not who I saw, not what the results were, but how many did I see? What reasons did I see these people? For those that are working to identify budgetary issues, spacing allocations, what are we going to do for the ministry? If you can document what all you are doing, that helps to support why you need the recognition, the space, the maybe a line item in the budget, whether or not it's salaried. And if you're doing enough, it may also be documentation on why we need to work towards salaried. So documentation helps to sell you. I talked about the formats. There is not one that's right and one that's wrong. Whatever works for you is fine. The important is that it includes all the things we learned in nursing school on what you document. You know, document what's there. You can use the subjective, objective assessment and planning, which we're all familiar with. You can do just anecdotal. But what did you observe? What did they find? Why did they come? And what did you do? You know, it's basically what you're going to include. You're going to want to secure the files because that's not open for just everybody. Those records are confidential. And unless there is some other situation that's been identified, they are confidential for you only. They're not for everyone else. They are for you to be able to refresh what is going on. Even as you share with the pastor, you're probably not sharing your file. You're sharing that you saw this person who had this surgery, but not necessarily every little detail of what was included. It's your record. Occasionally the patient will want a copy of it because you've been monitoring their blood pressure, and when they go to see their doctor, they want to take their list. Okay, with their permission, you can share it, but without their permission, you would not. What I oftentimes do is I make a copy and I give it to the patient, and then it's the patient's right to do with it what they want to. But if I would send it to the doctor without permission, of course I violated their confidentiality. But if I copy it and I give it to you, it's your record. Do with it what you like. But as it's in my office, it needs to be in a locked box. So most file cabinets have at least one drawer that locks. That's the drawer you need to use to put these in so that nobody can get at them except for you. And the only person that has access to the key is probably you, unless you have identified it as a shared ministry and that both of you have access. But that should be clearly stated that we are working together as a team, and so either one of us could check it. But if it doesn't say that, it's whoever did the work. Aggregate reports sent to the supervisor, congregational governing. This would be, let's say, monthly, maybe a little one, annually, a bigger one. That what is the summation of what took place? And this is a part of program review. It's also a part for the governing body to use as they're looking at planning for the future. Liability insurance. The parish nurse will want to be included in the congregation's policy, but also your own policy. The reason for that, it is very rare, if not unheard of, for the parish nurse in the congregation to have much of a liability issue because we are not doing invasive procedures and because the rapport between the parish nurse and the individual is usually good. Liability come when, what we learn in nursing school. You can do a really good job, but if they don't like your attitude, you're more likely to be sued than if you've got a wonderful attitude and screw up. So the fact that we're not doing invasive things and they generally like us, the chances are very limited, but it's possible. So if somebody was going to sue, worst case scenario, they're going to sue the congregation because they have you, and they're going to sue you because you're the one that did or didn't do what they think needed to be done. So the congregation's policy needs to have some inclusion for the parish nursing. Depending on the carrier, that may be just a statement and no particular extra money because we're not doing anything horrendous. Or there may be an additional amount of money, but it's nominal. You are going to want your own policy, but truthfully, I recommend that any nurse has their own policy. Because if you worked in the traditional nursing role, it covers you when you are in that traditional nursing role. But what about if the neighbor comes over and says, I know you're a nurse, can you come help me? Johnny just fell down the stairs. Okay, you're a good neighbor, you're going over to help, but you're still a nurse. You'll still be held to the standards of a nurse. So you went over to be helpful. If it didn't turn out right, they may end up suing you. You know, it doesn't happen often, but it only needs to happen once for you to remember. And so people who are going to do a suit will look for the big pockets and the little pockets. The congregation is the big pocket, you're the little pocket, but they're going to look for everything they can get. Professional liability insurance for nurses, unless you're working as a nurse practitioner or a nurse anesthesiologist, is really quite inexpensive. Some are less than $100. Others are not much more than $100, and you get an aggregate of $1 million of coverage. It's a really good investment, even if you happen to be unpaid, because whatever might come up is going to exceed that $100 in short order. Some congregations, that's an item that's put into their budget. They will pay your personal liability, not just their own. So that may be a negotiated item, but if not, I have my own. Most importantly is to take it to the Lord in prayer, because you're not going to find an ideal. You need to just find what's real, what works, and realize that the most important part of your parish nursing is what you do for people, not necessarily how glorious your office was and what system you used and all of that, because that can change as we go on. Okay, now you have your office. We have the role of a parish nurse. We know where your office is. And now I'm going to suggest we're going to talk about the parish nurse as a leader. And sometimes this is a real surprising thing for people because you just started day before yesterday. And you're just now trying to figure out what it is you're doing. And now I'm suggesting you are in a leadership role. Now, I didn't say you were the leader, but you are a leader. And so what do we do? What do parish nurses need to do to recognize their leadership position, what that means, and how to make it the best thing as far as you're working with other people? Just looking at a few things in action then. You may be the leader of devotions at a group. You're certainly not going to be the one that's doing the public sermons, the public proclamation of the gospel, but that doesn't mean you're not going to lead devotions at a meeting. So it may be just leading one particular activity. There are certain criterion for leadership that comes from a textbook on how to be a leader. And I'm going to just go over the criteria, not necessarily all the little points that come underneath of it, and we can just reflect. The first thing is engages in practice as a recognized member of the staff serving the faith community congregation. So if we look at parish nursing, how are you a member of the staff? It might be paid, it might be unpaid, but you are in a team ministry with the pastor. You may be involved with the DCE, you may be involved with the school. You are part of the staff. And if there are staff meetings, you should be a part of them. And if you're not, you should probably ask to be included. In most cases, I don't believe that if you're not a part of them, that it's because the staff is excluding you. I think they just haven't thought to include you because you're new. They've never had a parish nurse before. They don't know quite what to do with you. They don't realize that maybe you even want to come to the staff meetings because for them it's happened so often and people are getting tired of them and, oh, we're going to invite you too? Yeah, you can come. It's okay. You know, I don't think anybody's ever been refused. They just have never necessarily been invited because they didn't think about it. So if you've not been asked to be a part of the regular staff meetings, you might want to ask. Now, having asked doesn't necessarily mean you can go, because many of our parish nurses also have regular full-time jobs someplace else, and the staff meeting may be during the time that you are committed to your other job. And if your other job is what's paying your bills, and this is part-time volunteer or part-time unpaid, you can't take off from this job to go to a meeting at this job. But the fact that you are part of it and welcome to it, you should have privy to whatever minutes were there. You should be privy to the opportunity to entertain something, to ask them to discuss it. You know, there should be some communications, whether it's in person later, online before, phone-in capabilities, you know, whatever system works. Or once in a while, if the meeting happens when we're on break, you know, from wherever we teach, that at least you are recognized as part of that, and so there's some open dialogue. The criterion 2 works to create and maintain healthy work environments in the local faith community. Obviously, we're talking congregations. This is a book that uses the more inclusive term faith community rather than parish. Same thing. So as the parish nurse, we are interested in the individual congregant. We are also interested in families, but we're also interested in this whole group. So that means healthy relationships among the people. It means ministerial health. Watching out for your pastors, watching out for your teachers, watching out for each other, and hopefully they're watching out for you too, because whether or not you're salaried or not, you're still part of the staff, and as we'll talk later, we also have to be aware of self-care. And we're really good at caregiving, but we're not always good at caring about ourselves. And so we need to look for each other. And in a congregation, particularly one that has a sole pastor, that pastor and his family, as they have health issues, whether they're physical, emotional, social, whatever they might be, they need somebody that they can talk to in confidence, somebody who will look out for them. If they are in a dual ministry, they'll probably share with the associate pastor and each other. But if they're not going to openly share with the ordinary congregant because they don't want to diminish how they think the people, I don't want them to think that I'm too sick to function, or I don't want them to think my family's in crises, but they're human. There are issues. And so they need someone. Sometimes they will use the circuit counselor, but the circuit counselor probably doesn't live right here. They live in another town that's not easily accessible. So if you develop a good rapport with this person, you may be that person. The one person in the congregation that, because of your team ministry, you probably won't do it day one. You have to work on developing this relationship. But you will have developed a positive team ministry, and you already have a professional code of confidentiality with or without HIPAA. Nurses were told that almost on the beginning day of school. Confidentiality. So you're trusted, and you will become that person. So it may be a pastor with a blood pressure problem, and it's just a matter of checking their blood pressure periodically. Or it may be a pastor who really has concerns from a member of their family who has a serious illness, somebody who has a social emotional problem, and who do I talk to? If you can help keep the ministry team healthy, or at least supported, that also helps to keep the congregation healthy and supported. Because if the pastor is not healthy and well, what impact do you think that's going to have on the rest of the congregation? It's going to rub off, isn't it? Because if anybody's not healthy or well, we have the functioning is not as good as it might have been, irritability, fatigue, all of those things set in. And if the people do not realize he's dealing with problems, they just think there's something wrong with the personality and we don't like him. And so what we can do to support, because pastors, like nurses, are caregivers. We just happen to be caregivers with a different set of skills. And we're not really good at saying no. And we're not really good at equipping them to take care of themselves if I think I can do something better. But what that does is it sets up a dependency that shouldn't be there. And so needing to help them find that. It's also a way that we can take part of the, I'll use the word burden, but I don't mean burden in a negative way, part of the load off of them. If you're a congregation that has one pastor and 30, 40, 50 shut-ins, if this is the only thing the pastor did, he'd have a hard time visiting them all. But he's also supposed to teach some classes, prepare some sermons, meet with the elders, meet with all these other people. It's almost impossible. So the parish nurse is one who cannot do the visits instead of the pastor. I'm not suggesting that, because people still deserve to see their pastor, but can do some of the visits. So the pastor doesn't have to do all of the visits all of the time. The pastor needs to do the communion visits, but the parish nurse can tell them when somebody wants the communion visits. The parish nurse can go and just be the hand holder, the prayer, the sharing a verse, an extra set of eyes, a linkage from the congregation, and knowing that maybe they didn't have to come 3 times, they only had to come once because you were coming the other time, and it's a sharing of the load. Criterion 3 displays an ability to define a clear vision, the associated goals, and a plan to implement and measure progress towards holistic health through spiritual care. Sounds like all these nice administrative meetings we had to go to at the hospital or on campus or something. And you thought when you went to work in the church, you were done with that. Well, you're not. Most congregations have a mission and or vision statement. In order for them to easily include you, endorse you, and help you move forward, you have to have a vision that relates to the overall vision. If the church's vision goes this way and yours kind of goes this way, you're going at opposite directions. So you need to look at what is the overall vision of the church, what is their mission statement, and how do you fit into that? What are some goals? And by doing that, you can get the support and collaboration sometimes with some of the other groups because we're all going in the same direction. We also know we have to be able to measure our progress. So, we know those old measurable objectives that we had on care plans, whether it's nursing care plans or whether it's educational plans. I can't just say you improve. I have to say 3 more people came or something. Be specific so you know whether you reached them. Criterion 4. Demonstrates a commitment to continuous lifelong learning and spiritual growth for self and others. Okay, so self and others. You're taking the very basic course, but hopefully as life goes on, this isn't the last learning that you're going to do. There may be some continuing ed. There may be some meetings and conferences within your own networking. There may be some national conferences, there may be some books or articles or online discussions, but something that what you learn when you leave here at the end of this is not the last thing you're ever going to learn, that we continue to grow. Lifelong learning. And just as health education comes in various modalities for our congregation, it comes in various modalities for us too. So we can't say one is good and one is bad. What we can say is we certainly encourage the nurse who is serving in a LCMS congregation to at least have some of this that is consistent with what we would be looking at, and you're growing in what's happening within our church, what are some concerns within our church, and this can be done through newsletters that are available free. All you got to do is sign up for them. It can be available through some online discussions, which are free. You just have to sign up for them. So it's not a cost factor. It's just a commitment to do it. You also need to do the spiritual growth. If we believe that the holistic person, holistic health, includes body, mind, and spirit, that means for us too. And so the parish nurse who is not active in worship, not active in Bible study, not active in personal devotions, is probably not growing spiritually. And if we're not growing spiritually, we're probably moving back because it's very hard to be stagnant. You're either getting better or we fall away. And if the main goal of the parish nurse is intentional care of the spirit, we have to intentionally take care of our spirit. And see, you all have your Bibles in front of you, and I'm not going to take time to do a Bible study, but what I would suggest is, any of you have a favorite verse that when things are a problem or you're feeling low, what verse do you grab to? Anybody have a verse you'd like to share?
Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then everything else will be added.
Okay, and that's a verse that you can use for yourself, but you can also use it in your ministry, can't you? Yeah, because you feel touched by it. It's not like I'm picking up my Bible and just reading chapter and verse. Your heart is in it, and you can share what it means to you, and that may share with someone else. Anybody else got one?
Mine's a little odd, but it's in Mark where the disciples say, even the winds and the waves obey him. And in our culture of science becoming, oh, God didn't create the world, this is the process, anytime there's any doubt, anytime I hear any doubt, anytime, in my college years I felt any little doubt, I just read that and thought, wow, there's a God that controls the wind and the waves. How powerful and
If you
wonderful.
can do
and
that, it can
majesty.
certainly help me too, Candy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are so many, and situations will change. One that I use a lot now that probably 20 years ago I didn't is because of life circumstances will change that. And this is towards the end of Romans 8 where we have the list of separations. Neither height nor depth nor angels or principalities, etc. But my favorite part of the verse is nor anything else. Because I think God wrote that just for me, and maybe for you too. Because he had this whole list of things that wasn't going to separate us from the love of God. But if you're like the average person, whatever problem you have wasn't on that list. And so you think, but this is the one. I'm not afraid of heights, but I'm afraid of this diagnosis. I'm not afraid of principalities, but man, I hate this wall. And it was my first trip to Bethlehem, where I go fairly often, and the separation wall that really made this a very important verse for me. Because I knew of the wall, but I didn't know the extent of the wall. And as we pulled up to it, and I'm not going to try to go into that because that's not the purpose of this class, but the idea is it's called separation wall. It separates this side from this side, and it's horrendous. But the people behind the wall are so filled with hope, so faithful, so active in their church, so openly sharing the message of Jesus Christ, even though they are the minority in the community, that they were such an inspiration to me that nor anything else includes the wall. Okay. It includes the wall. It includes my diagnosis. It includes the fact that I forgot to bring something the other day, but you can go back and retrieve it. I mean, there's no big deal. The only big deal is if I don't keep God in my life. So the nor anything else becomes a real favorite verse that I've used a lot. And we can just think of different issues. Favorite Bible stories, favorite hymns, favorite passages. And if they're meaningful to you, they're probably going to be meaningful in your ministry with other people, because it's not just an academic lesson that you're sharing. You're sharing your heart at the same time you're telling your story. And that's something to really hang on to. Criterion 5, teaches others to succeed by mentoring and other strategies. So you are the parish nurse. You are the only nurse on your parish nurse team. So who are you mentoring? You might be mentoring your caregiving volunteers. You might be mentoring other nurses who will help you with something but don't want to go to all the trouble of taking the class and the continuing efforts for being the parish nurse. I may be a nurse who helps you out, a nurse in the parish, but not the parish nurse. You may be mentoring some young person who just wants to know what this is all about. When you become more experienced, you may be the person, when the new parish nurse down on the other side of town starts up her practice and needs a mentor, you may be the mentor for her. Within your district networks, you may become either the rep herself, or many districts have a team that works with the rep, particularly those districts who have a lot of nurses. It's difficult for one person to get to all parts of your district. When we look at our 35 districts, some states have more than one district, and some districts have more than one state, because it's not based on geography alone, it's based on number of congregants and congregations. So I live in Illinois, we have 3 districts, but some districts have 4 or 5 states. So if you're a district I mean, we think Northern Illinois district is big to have to go all this ways. But what about the rep who's serving 5 districts or 5 states? She's going to want to find somebody in each of these states to help her out, because otherwise you can't do that. So you may find yourself, all of the state of Missouri, because that's where the ladies in this course are from, Missouri's a big state. And to spread it out. Others that may be taking it later online are going to see, they may be from some of these 5 and 6 districts. Even if you're small in geography, such as Northern Illinois district where I live, we're big in the number of people who are coming on board. So even though the geography may be more manageable, the numbers are overwhelming. So she still is going to need some help to touch base with all those people, because you're also doing other things. So mentoring. Right now you may be the person who feels like you need a little mentoring, but you will be a mentorer. Yeah. Works both ways. Exhibits creativity and flexibility through times of change. My guess is, if it hasn't already, sometime something is going to change in your congregation. That change may be a new pastor. They're all going to preach the same word and sacraments, but they all have different styles. So you need to change with, how do I interact with, how do we work together as a team? When the demographics of your area change, what maybe was one time an affluent Anglo church may suddenly become a church in an area where everybody's moving out because the industries all went out. May later become a mixed ethnic group. None of these are a better or worse situation. But if you're used to only doing it this way, and now that model does not work because I have a different group, I have a different set of needs, how can you change? And how can you help other people change? Change is difficult. I remember within our own congregation, nothing really that related to parish nursing, but it reminds me of how difficult change can be sometime. The major controversy when we went from the old red hymn book to the blue one. Some of you are too young to know about the red book. But when we had the red book and now we're going to switch to the blue book, it was a major controversy. And that really didn't make any difference, did it? But other things do matter. You know, okay, the pastor has a different style. We went from traditional to contemporary. Okay, we have people who really don't like the contemporary. They only come to traditional. And we like people who only like traditional. They don't want to go to contemporary. And so the controversy over which is the right one, well, they're both the right one. They just speak to different people in different ways. So knowing that, you need to be creative and you need to know what changes are taking place. And sometimes you just need to be able to listen with a neutral mind to both sides and encourage them in what is the most important thing is that the gospel doesn't change. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That's another good verse. Demonstrates energy, excitement, and passion for a quality, spirit-filled work. If you are not excited about what you're doing, it will be really difficult to get other people excited about what you're offering. I don't know that there's any more to say about that. You know, if you're offering something and you look bored, tired, worn out, oh, I got to do this. Okay. Remember, it's not that we have to, it's that we get to. If I get to do it, there's an element of excitement and passion and fire under my belly. If I have to, your shoulders are hung down, your back is stooped, and your step is slow. And excitement is contagious. Criterion 8, the leader will willingly accept mistakes by themselves and others, creating a culture in which risk-taking is not only safe, it's expected. If it's not allowed for you or anyone else to make a mistake, you're never going to grow. And so we need to be willing to step out and try something new, and the only way you failed at it is you didn't try. Maybe what you learned is that wasn't the best approach, but at least you gained something from it. If one of the volunteers that work for you does something just a little bit different than you were hoping they would, rather than to blame them, she did it, it's really good to own up and partner with that and say, well, we'll try to do better next time. You know, don't put all of the blame onto the other person. Be willing to walk the journey without throwing somebody else under the bus. Be their support, be their encouragement. Number 9, inspires loyalty by valuing people as the most precious asset in the congregation. That can go back to when we talked about volunteers, and we talked about if somebody volunteers to do something, you will certainly want to use them, because otherwise we value their money more than we value them. But because they're volunteers, they're unpaid. So what can we do? We can value them by a kind word, by a card, by a plant, by anything, taking them to lunch once in a while. Nobody expects anything big or expensive, but everybody likes to know that they're appreciated. And even if they're not volunteers for you, look to see who's doing things. And when you see, that was just a really good way you lit the candles today, or I really like the way that banner looks, or I really like how, let people know. But don't make it phony. People can tell when it's phony praise, and everybody has some talent. And whatever it is you can do to appreciate it. Directs the coordination of care within the congregation, across settings and among caregivers, including the training and oversight of unlicensed volunteers in any designated task. So this is, you're the leader. Don't just get people's name on a list and then send them out to pasture. Equip them, support them, encourage them. See how 2 groups may be able to work together. Maybe 2 things that we wouldn't ordinarily think together would be your caregiving volunteers that go to the home and the people who are part of the music ministry. Okay. It could be that you have someone at home who's totally shut in that would really appreciate it once in a while if somebody came and played their guitar, their harp, their flute, brought a CD of the recent cantata, whatever would be appropriate in your setting, but it's a linkage. You weren't the music minister, they were, but how can they help you? Working with the youth, what are some things the youth could do? The youth could maybe mow the lawn. They could maybe, somebody who has some little task. Maybe there's a volunteer day, not an every day, but a volunteer day where the youth can be involved. Maybe they can help you go to the nursing homes and mingle and serve with the people. The chances of whatever's going on are limited only by the creativity you have and by the description of what's available in your congregation. And notice the oversight of unlicensed volunteers. That means if you have someone who used to be an RN, but their license lapsed, they cannot be a parish nurse because they don't have an active license. But does that mean they can't help you do anything? No. Find the things that they could do without being in conflict with the Nurse Practice Act because they're doing something without a license, and let them feel valued. They could make some of your just friendly visits. They could help with some card ministries. They could help with a lot of things. They just can't do what the Nursing Act says you need a license to do. Their knowledge didn't disappear. Their legal status disappeared. Serves in key roles in the congregation by participating on committees, councils, and administrative teams. So just as I hope you'll be included in the staff meetings, Each congregation has either a board of directors or a church council or something that meets regularly. In a lot of cases, the parish nurse becomes an ex officio member of that. We're not a voting member, but just as the pastor or the principal is probably an ex officio member, the parish nurse can very well become an ex officio member, meaning that we're there to be an open dialogue with all these people, to share some concerns, to share a little bit more about the ministry, to maybe highlight some points, but you're not a voting member. But you can serve on task force and committees and picking up particular projects and concerns. 12, promotes advancement of faith community nursing, or as we call it, parish nursing, and the profession of nursing through participation in professional organizations of nursing and the clergy. This usually means and the organizations are really loosely held together organizations. This may be such things as Lutheran Parish Nurses International, which is largely for nurses, but interested clergy and other people are also involved. It could be the annual conference, which is really for parish nurses, but clergy oftentimes come. It could be if there's a meeting with Lutherans in medical missions, may have nurses and clergy there. It may be something in your district that are mercy or human care events that could have parish nurses and clergy there. The more opportunities that the parish nurse and the clergy are together, the more they're going to understand each other's role and how they can network together. So looking for ways that that can happen. The styles of leadership, there are different styles. It really doesn't matter which one you use. What matters is that you know what it is. Personal mastery, that you have learned something in particular and you're leading the group and you're sharing it with others. Simple definition, certainly more involved, but simple definition. Future focused really defines itself. Our idea isn't just what's happening today, it's also where we might go in the future. Innovative initiative, we've never tried it that way. Now that sometimes is a problem because if a lot of congregations, you want to try something new and their answer is, we've never done it that way. That may mean we're never going to either. But you can figure out some way to try it that way. And if it doesn't work, don't consider it a failure of parish nursing. Consider that you've learned that way doesn't really work in your area. And now we'll look another way. Organizational development, and of course we're always looking to improve. So you may use one or more of those. Parish nurses are leaders, but the Christian parish nurse also follows Jesus. He is the ultimate leader. Well, we spent a lot of time talking about caring for other people and also caring for the pastor and the other staff. But one person we haven't talked about is caring for yourself. We won't spend a lot of time on that, just enough to, let us think about why it's important. Nurses are notoriously caregivers. And as caregivers, we notoriously reach out and take care of all kinds of people. But what we don't always do is take care of ourselves. And I think the Bible tells us to love our neighbor as ourselves. Not better than, not instead of, but as ourselves. So if we don't really love ourselves, we're not able to really love the other person either. What are some things that you maybe have either seen, hopefully in other nurses and not necessarily in yourself, but truth be told is probably in all of us, when you can tell that you've run out of filling up your own bucket, that you're running out of steam, that you need to nourish yourself? Are there some symptoms that sometimes come up that say, stop, I need?
Frustration with how things are turning out, or good or bad, or just being frustrated.
Yeah, sometimes we get frustrated over things that are not really worth being frustrated over. It's that proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. That particular issue wasn't much, but on top of everything else it was.
Maybe lack of patience and always in a hurry to get it done because you're so tired and worn down that it just takes its toll.
Absolutely. And so it's important that we do take time. Some statistics, what happens when we don't take good care of ourselves? 85% of pain and disease is related to stress. 85%. So if we could get rid of the stress, we would be more well, wouldn't we? 80% of the conversations have to do with ourselves. So when we become overwhelmed, instead of talking and focusing on the other person, we're really focusing on ourselves rather than the other one. We just don't catch it. So we're internal dialogue, we're sharing with others. Instead of we, it's me. Instead of you, it's I. And that's not what you thought you were talking about. Internal dialogue. We need to build ourselves up. And usually at that point, it's usually the criticisms. I should have done better. I need to do more. It wasn't right. And so as we're doing this 80% conversation with ourselves, it's not praise and praise. It's not congratulating yourself on a good time. It's not thanking God for giving you the ability to serve. It's, oh, I wish I would have done more. I wish I could have done more. Why we need to be good caregivers of ourselves is to realize that our body is a temple of the Lord. And if our body is a temple of the Lord, we want to take care of it for the Lord. He's living in my body. The temple of the Spirit is there. He created our health. He created our wholeness. To abuse our health is to abuse the gift that we've been given. So we need to take care of ourselves. And we become a good role model. If we are not taking good care of ourselves, it's very difficult for us to tell other people to take good care of themselves. We say, you need so much rest. And they'll say, and when did you rest last? You need to eat better. Well, why are you eating junk food? What we do sometimes speaks more than what we say. So we become, taking care of ourselves is a role model for someone else to also take good care of themselves. This particular model that was developed by Lois Peacock is a parish nurse in San Francisco, and she's been very active in ministerial health issues as well as in parish nursing. So these are some principles that you can apply to yourself, but also some principles you can apply to your pastor. How do you take good care of yourself without guilt? First one she suggests is take time to be with the Lord through prayer, meditation, and scripture. If you don't have time every day to spend with the Lord, you're going to have some spiritual distress. We're not having conversations. I know for myself, that's how I begin my day. Now, it doesn't matter whether you do your devotions first thing in the morning or in the afternoon or at night, but what matters is that you have a routine and that that's part of the routine. Personally, I do it first thing in the day and maybe later on as well, but first thing in the day has always been good for me. It seems as though if I didn't take those few minutes at the beginning of the day, the rest of the day just doesn't work right. You know, that verse may speak something special. That prayer time focuses me. And just the quiet time, you can center and say, oh, Lord, what is it you want me to do today? Rather than, I've got so much to do, I don't have time to talk to you today, God, I got to go do it. It's not going to work right. I need to talk to him first. She suggests that we take frequent deep breaths all through the day. Breathe in, breathe out. And then she says we need to laugh. Laughter is the best way to encourage healthy breathing. Humor is good medicine. So take time to be light. Deep breathing, laughter, enjoying some time. Affirmations. Don't be hard on yourself and don't be hard on one another. Ask yourself what works for you. How do you refuel and refill your cup? And it will be different for different people. Some people refill by sitting quietly listening to music. Some refill by going out and jogging. Some refill by doing arts and crafts. Some refill by taking a nap or reading a book. Whatever works for you, So looking at yourself, taking frequent Sabbaths. That might be a 10-minute break. It might be a day off. It might be a vacation. But those frequent 10-minute breaks become really good. You can come back and be nourished. Don't work nonstop, full of stress. The last thing that she has on her list is who is your support community? And that I think is really important. We as parish nurses are there to support everybody else, but you need to identify who is there to support you. It may be your family. You certainly can't share with them confidential issues, but you can share with them the generalities of how you feel and your concerns. It may be your pastor. As you are a support for him, he can also be a support for you. It may be your networking. But who do you have? It may be a girlfriend that you go out for lunch with. It may be a friend that you call periodically. The modality that you use and who you use will vary. You got to find that person. And that's kind of where our network is. Find the load. In your curriculum guides, those of you who are actually taking the course and not just auditing the videos, she's included a contract with yourself, and we're not going to go over that on the video, but it basically means identify for yourself what's working and what isn't. Promise yourself what you're going to do to set up a plan to be better to yourself, and then identify someone who's going to be your accountability partner. It's much like if you go on a diet and you told somebody, you might stick with it a little better than if you didn't tell anybody. If you said you're going to start an exercise program and you told somebody, you might stick with it better than if you didn't tell anybody, because we don't want to fail. And so having a support person who knows what my plan is somebody who will also help encourage you on your plan. What are some of the things that you like to do just to unwind, to feel better, to rest on your Sabbath?
I quilt.
Okay, quilting.
Even if I don't actually quilt, I sort my fabric or I rearrange or...
Okay, so you're kind of a crafty sewer.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Pick up the phone and call a friend.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it really doesn't matter what it is. It just matters that you can automatically, and that's why I asked. If you're feeling down and you have to sit and say, now what is it I could do? You're thinking this when you are down, and you probably don't have the energy and the creativity to think of that thing. But if you have an arsenal of what are things that works for you, you know what you can pick up. Playing music. I'm not really a musician. I do have a little organ and I do have a harp, but neither one of them am I talented at. I just play at them. But I also enjoy listening to music. Reading a book, just for no reason at all. Not reading a book because I'm preparing some topic. I'm just reading a book, talking to people. A lot of things that we can do. So I want you to think about that so that you're not just busy taking care of everyone else, you're also taking care of yourself. The next thing I want to just share with you, and it really is just a quick moment. You have something in your guide that's called Sharing with Peers, Writing for Publication. This actually can be part of your being a leader. It can also be part of you taking care of yourself. One way that people take care of themselves sometimes is journaling, sometimes is creative writing. We can put all of those things together and say we can share it with each other. So there are a number of places where writing for publication helps you get something out of your mind through your fingertips onto the paper, and that's the creativity, but it also shares with each other. So certainly there are professional journals that you can write for, but they are really sometimes a more difficult process because you have to do a lot of research. You also have to go through the editorial boards. It's a good project, but I'm not sure I'd call it self-care. But we also have a number of newsletters or online sources where they're just looking for a devotion or a health topic. I think the one I put in your book is the one that's on Lutheran Parish Nurses International. Every month they change their health topic. Every month they change their devotion. And they're really looking for different people, not the same people to write all the time. So initially you might find it refreshing just to go on and read them. Some of them are from people in the United States, some are from people in Australia, Finland, Germany, Palestine, India, from around the world. They're always in English. So if English is not the first language, they are in both languages. But it will be English, so you will be able to read it. So it may be refreshing just to read those, but it may be refreshing for you sometimes to think about being creativity and to share that. And writing then to share with your peers as well as to get your thoughts out. Continuing education, the last thing on our agenda before we do the planning for internships and things that are unique only to the course and not to the person who's just taking the videos. Continuing development. Parish nursing, like anything else, needs to have continuing development. Not necessarily mandated number of hours, but a process. And just a couple of things I'd like to just share with you as opportunities. When we finish this section, we will have finished a very basic course. And we have hit, through the videos, just the highlights of each section. So if you're someone who is only auditing and taking the videos, you got a really quick whistle top across the country and saw a little bit about a lot of things. Those who actually register for the course actually receive a curriculum guide that has some printed material that goes with it, has some suggested activities, and has some additional discussion questions. So from the audit of the video to registering from the course can be one simple step on where did you go for some continuing development. The course also comes with some mentoring and some intern options. That's another step for continuing development. This course does not offer either college credit or continuing education points. But if those are things you want, there are other courses that do offer those, and so that would be another step that people can do for continuing education. As we look at other ways that we can work on developing, continuing developing for your parish nursing, if you're registered for the course, there is an internship option. And the internship options do vary. It could be online mentoring, it can be an online discussion group, it can be sharing with only the unique people who are taking it at the same time, it could be sharing with a broader community. It could be if there is another parish nurse within the LCMS who lives in close enough proximity to where you are that we can hook up a personal on-site helper that you can visit them and they can visit you. Those who are outside the United States, the same thing would be true within your own faith community. If you have a national church body who already has parish nurses, perhaps one of them can serve as a mentor. If you are the first parish nurse in your national church body, there probably is not one on site who can serve as a mentor, but we will certainly do it long distance and by finding other resources that can be helpful. Whether you're enrolled in the class or not, the other option is available for everyone, and that is certainly anyone would be invited to be a part of your district networking. And your district networking then does allow you to have some sharing and some fellowship with anywhere from a couple to 50, depending on how many are within your network. And those are things that would advise for everyone. There are a team of leaders in parish nursing within LCMS. I'm privileged to work with 3 or 4 that serve on the leadership council, and 1 or more of us would always be available to help you. So we thank you for taking the course. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll look forward to some continued development.